Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to welcome you in the afternoon session of the CGEF online edition. We had a great morning, and now we are ready to start to welcome many inspiring speakers that will, go through a work environment and how this is disruptive and changing, as well as women empowerment session and global economy and rethinking as well the different models to build a more sustainable future going forward. So right now, I am very pleased to welcome a great friend and a source of inspiration with Frode Avring. Frode is an international expert in the field of human resources. He is advising many private sector leading companies. And Frode is going to share with us on the new deal of the employer-employee relationship. So Frode, the floor is yours, and we speak a little bit later with some Q&A. Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. So it's a pleasure to be with you. And I will show you already on the first slide a little bit what I'm up to. So what is happening in my life. I think I will be able to share screen, right? Yeah, so this is how it works. So first of all, I'm chairing some associations, and I'm part of a research center called the Digital Leadership Lab. I'm also the co-founder of a venture called HR Guide. So our goal is to optimize how human resources are managed in companies. So we help, in fact, the CEO and president of companies to optimize the setup of human resource in terms of people, systems, culture, organization, and so on. So having some experience, and I will not bother you with all my background, but just so you know roughly what I'm up to in life. So I welcome you because I come from a place which is up in the north, where I lived for the first 17 years of my life. It's in Norway. And I guess most of you, in fact, have something to do with abroad. So when we are in this kind of setting, we all work internationally, or we all have international impact. And many of you may be abroad or have been abroad for most of your lives, like me. Others have punctual experience, but I will treat, in fact, my intervention as a global intervention. And I know there are people from Japan and the west coast of the US and everything which is in between. So I guess this will be the right way to address you. So please ask questions in the chat as we go, and Jonathan will pick them up, and we will find out what to do with it. So first of all, let me talk about gig. So gig is the fact that you go and play originally music. You come with your instrument, your guitar, your trumpet, your saxophone, or what you have, and you join with other people at the pub or in some other place in the evening, and you have a gig. You play together. Now this has become the word that designates now a playing job. So you have a job for playing. So you have a mandate, you have an assignment by some restaurant owner or by some event organizer, and you have a gig. So you are paid for playing. And what happens is that this is now spilling into the economy with gigs. So we have a lot of gigs, a lot of people that work punctually or for short periods of time or in different ways, in fact, in different areas. So this is what you call the gig economy. The gig economy is therefore something which is not a stable lifelong employment, but the opposite. And you know some of these names, and you use them probably to a certain extent when we talk about eating, transportation, lodging. This is gig economy also stuff, because there are a lot of people working part-time on other things than their full-time day job. Or they have reduced perhaps also the percentage, and they have increased the percentage of doing new things. So this is a new way of seeing the economy. And it's rather significant because it's currently 38% of the population in the United States of America that have more than one job and that do one of these things that you see on the screen. in addition to another job. So they may be freelancers, they may be working occasionally or seasonally because of the harvest, for instance. There may be people working at interim, so they work for a period of time intensely, like we do in HR Guide. So we are in the gig economy as interim heads of HR, for instance, sometimes. So we send people for short-term and mandates to optimize things. It can be self-employed. Very often it's self-employed, but it can also be different forms of employment. And then it often has to do with projects. So it has to do with managing something which has a beginning and an end that you can plan. And therefore the gig is planned, the price is fixed, the goals are fixed. So this is something that has a significance because it was not like this 10, 20 years ago. And it's increasing and it's taking off in different parts of the world. And it has pros and cons. The pros, of course, is flexibility. The cons may be security. And you saw this in the recent, or in the current, in fact, COVID crisis. The coronavirus virus has impacted us. We have seen how precarious some of these jobs or these gigs may be. We have seen how difficult it is to have a guarantee of income when you have this kind of economy. And we have also seen the limitations, therefore, of flexibility in downturn or in different crises. 28% is what we have in the European mainland. So 38 in the US, 28 is now in Europe. And this number is increasing also. So, and you will experience this in other parts of the world too. So let's have a look at what happens now in society. And I thought about which other transformation that I can talk about today. So the first would be the expectations, what we just saw now. We will have people expecting to have a different type of work environment. They will not be aiming for lifelong employment. They will be aiming for more education. They will be aiming for different types of projects. There will be a learning component therefore in the job. And there will also be a part of the job which has to do with interacting with other people. We will come back to this afterwards. Around these expectations, which is the central part, you have business models that are changing. You have tools and platforms that enable this change to happen. And you have, of course, the skills and learning that I just talked about. So let's have a closer look at these four. And this is the main part of my intervention. So the first about the new tools and platforms. And you know these. You know the hardware. You know how to connect the hardware with Wi-Fi. You have social media. You can use the cloud more and more. You don't need a material hard drive anymore for most activities. You have collaborative platforms like this one with the data conferencing, video, image. You can share very easily. I think we all have become a little bit zombies now during the crisis. So we are able to do a lot of Zooms, but we are also dependent on it. So we are like walking forward with a lot of Zooms or other instruments to teleconference and to video conference. And this is also something that is changing our perception. We also have interactive learning. So we start more and more to learn interactively without direct human intervention. So all these things are developed and there are thousands of new solutions every day. So there's a very fast move forward on what is possible in terms of interaction. Is this desirable? That's another question, but it's possible. So we need to position ourselves towards this. We need to find the balance to these tools and platforms so that we have enough time for our real world lives. And at the same time, we have enough presence on these platforms in order to be relevant also in the professional and private area through this channel. And this is a balance which is individual, but also sometimes pushed by society or by companies or by the job, the gig job or the project that you have. So this is something where people are now moving and thinking and trying to find a new balance in their lives. Another thing which is happening, therefore, is business models. You just saw these symbols, you know, with the gig economy symbols, let's say. So you have a lot of new ways of transportation, and you have My Taxi, which is a taxi response. You have Airbnb homestay for the lodging, But at the same time, you have Booking.com, which was for hotels and which has come into this new market of gig economy. So it forces also more traditional companies to go into the same space, changing their business model, changing the way they think. And this is not only valid for profit, it's also valid for non-for-profit. It is also valid for international organizations. How can they compete for resources, for talent, for projects, for visibility when you have all these tools? Are they able to do this? We saw it during this crisis, coronavirus crisis. Very, very difficult for international organizations to be heard because nations took over more than organizations. And these things also have to do then with finding out how it works and being able to apply this. The rules of the game are, it needs to be easy to set up, it needs to be easy to disseminate. So your product, your service, your mission, if it's an organization. You don't need assets. You don't need anything solid. Not necessarily, at least. You have artificial intelligence helping you to find out how to improve all the time what you propose, being it a product, a service, an idea, better working conditions if you're an organization working for that, like in the United Nations, the goal we are talking about today. And then the user experience needs to be seamless. Like you today, you click and you are in a room. This is a seamless user experience. If you click 2 times, it's less seamless. If you click 3 times, it's even less, and so on. These are the expectations you have to business models, and a lot is possible today. Therefore, the balance has changed also in terms of business, not only for the first point, which regarded the gig, but also now on the business itself. So let's look at just the word digital. I just want to be sure we have the same understanding of this. So digital skill means that you are able to use and understand an app, a tool. This tool that you are working on now can understand and perform a task. And you can combine the knowledge between these different things, so you know this. But then a business model is when you use these technologies for your business. And when you go into transformation, then it's the combined use of these technologies to change your business model. So you use the technology to change your model, or you change your model using technology, and the culture and the organization in order to generate more value. At the end, if you don't generate more value, it will have less of an impact, right? So it's about generating value through the new opportunities you have. Being it for businesses, being it for individuals, being it for organizations. So, which competencies do you need then as an employee, or as a manager, or as a business owner, or as an organizational exponent in the national field? So you need a few things for sure, and this is based on the research we did in the research center that I'm chairing. You need to master the tools, of course, but you also need to share information. Open data is a term that was used by the previous US administration. It's about being transparent and innovative through sharing information, not withholding it and being opaque and secretive. So by sharing, you create innovation and you enable your team, your company, your country to progress. So this is a very important skill in terms of successful long-term thinking. Also, leadership, it's more about co-leadership than leadership. You will share power. If you are sort of thinking about the vertical leadership model with one boss that knows everything and takes all the right decisions, that is a thing of the past, at least in business and very often also in society. You can just look at which countries managed well the crisis, right? These were democracies. These were countries where you have strong leadership, but also strong feedback and very good discussions around what happens in society. Agility, which you hear all the time, so I will not talk too much about that, but of course you need agility, you need to adapt quickly. But above all, to the right, you have the mindset. And the mindset is about, who do I serve? I serve the customer, I serve the client, I serve the person that benefits from my mission. If my mission is to eradicate poverty, my client is the poor. If my mission is to eradicate illiteracy, my client is the illiterate, right? So customer in that sense, in the large sense. And this mindset about how can I do it in a way that helps them also through digital to come into my world and be more on par, well, that is indeed what you need. And if you don't have the right mindset, the rest will fail. Even if you share data, the others will help, but the mindset needs to be there. Digital first, but also customer first. So that means also that in companies, you will be looking more and more for people that have what we call the X shape. So the I shape is what we were looking for before. This is vertical knowledge. You have a very strong understanding of one thing or one specific area or one relatively clear area. Then you have the T shape, which is you have still this vertical knowledge, but in addition, you will have some knowledge of other areas, so horizontal knowledge. Therefore, the horizontal bar on top of the T, which means you know more also about other things. And then you come into what we call the X-shaped, which is in fact the capability of moving, of adapting. So the fact that you have both vertical and horizontal knowledge means that you are able to learn fast, and therefore you can roll through the company, you can come into other areas, you are able to learn new things quickly, take with you what you have learned in other places, and therefore contribute more in a more valuable way to the next success of your organization, company, or gig. And this is also an expectation from staff. When we talk about the deal, employer-employee, it's also an expectation. I want to learn other things than just my vertical knowledge and my little bit of horizontal. I want to be vertical in a few other areas. I want to go more in depth in some areas. This is something which is an expectation that you will meet more and more frequently nowadays. So which are the other expectations? First of all, we know that we have a lot of generations now in the workforce. We have at least 3 generations in the workforce, in some countries 4 generations at the same time working. And these are the things you will see, less formality, more pleasure, fun at work. This is something, fun at work didn't exist some decades back, right? Now it's sort of the trend. You need to have this, right? And reverse mentoring, which is the fact that you have younger people mentoring older people on technology and older people helping new people, younger people to understand the company and the rules. So this is very interesting also. I can advise you to, if you are in the older people area like me, to have sometimes some fresh ideas from the next generation and to challenge you a little bit. It's very helpful. And then the way of working, of course, with all these installations, space offerings are different. But at the same time, open space is very nice, but you also need to concentrate. So you have different flexi space, we call it very often. And flatter hierarchy. I mean, hierarchy is not really key anymore. My students sometimes say the company hierarchies should not be a pyramid, it should be a pizza. So where you have a lot of different ingredients and the taste is good at the end and they all mix well together. But of course, that's a little bit ideal. It depends on where you are also culturally and from a historical point of view. But you work and play, in any case, mixed, a bit more mixed than before, right? So what you see here is what used to be, this is a typical office. This is a New York drawing. So you see the person in the middle. I think it's a he because he has a tie. And this is how it used to be. And now this is how it can be. One of my friends did this for a company here in Switzerland. And the point of this picture here is that the guy is sitting anywhere. It's not where he's sitting anywhere. This happens to be the right place for what he's doing now. In half an hour, he might be sitting at the table, or he might be in a meeting room, or he might be at another desk. But the point is, we have different work environments than before. And this is something which is not going to go backwards. But we need to adapt also to how we handle these environments. It has to do with the workflow, not only with the work space. So let's have a little wrap up now on, I'd like you to think about what I'm coming with now in terms of how is your reality. So first of all, what I think we will have less of is standard employment agreements And I think we'll have more short-term project-based assignments, where on one size fits all doesn't work anymore, because there will be exceptions, and there will be, some projects that are big, others that are small. You will not always have an undefined duration contract. It will be more project and outcome based. So you define the beginning and the end. It will be based on salary ranges, but there may also be a success fee logic to this. So if you manage to do this, you will have a higher outcome. And if you don't manage to do it, of course, you will have a lower outcome. This presentialism, the fact that we are all visible from 9 to 5, we have seen it clearly in the last months. This is not something which has a very strong future. It's not the fact that you're in the office doesn't guarantee that you work. And the fact that you are not in the office does not mean that you don't work, right? So we will have more of these collaborative platforms, flexi-time, remote office, and the asynchronic co-creation. We can create together, but in different moments of the day. We don't need to be together all the time, but we need to meet somewhere, and that's a platform. And then the employer decides. And now, and this is part also of this new deal that I'm talking about, talent has negotiation power, because talent is more prepared than before. There is a shortage of skilled people, especially. And with the increase of freelancers and gig economy people, of course, it will be more difficult to find. So you will see a boost in also the platform that offer these kind of things, and they will become more and more automated and more transparent. So the what's in it for me, WIIFM, what's in it for me mindset will be visible. And this questioning about give me 3 strengths, 3 weaknesses, where do you see yourself in 5 years? This will hopefully disappear, and we'll get more about what is the culture of the company that I'm going to work for, what is your purpose, what is your mission, what is your value proposition, how is the reputation of the company. All these things are important, and of course, which tools do you have, and what can I learn if I come to work with you? This has changed, and this for many companies, this is vital to understand, because if you don't adapt to the fact that employees are more skilled, more informed, and more demanding than before, then you might not be giving them what they are looking for, and you might get lower quality talent as an employer, or as an employee, of course, you will not find exactly those companies that you want to find. So my proposal for a first step for everybody is quite simply to think, okay, how flexible am I as an employee? How flexible am I as the responsible of a venture? And how authentic am I about going in this direction? Am I really interested in all this? Or shall I just say, no, in fact, it's fine, but I will continue on my road. I don't need all this kind of thing. So have a look at yourself and find out if you're interested in thinking more about going in this direction. And are you flexible enough to go there and to find the talent, if that's the case? Or as a talent, are you going to become an X, or are you an X, or how would you want to face this? So this was my last slide. I'm open for questions now or later. This is the way to reach me if you want also in the future. I thank you for the attention, and I hope I will be able to have a few questions that I can answer, or comments or experience that you want to share. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. It was very much enlightening in the evolution of the work environment and what is related to that. So one first question is, as you know, we are trying to find the solutions to cope with the 2030 agenda of the United Nations, with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. We know that to reach those goals, we have to be coming with creativity, new ideas, and new ways to address the challenges at local level. Do you think that what we are experiencing now in this post-COVID world, which is acting as an accelerator in the disruption of the work environment, can it be a great asset? Can it be a great opportunity to support and encourage for more entrepreneurship, social entrepreneurship, creativity, and as well, ways for people to partner one with each other?
Yeah, I think it will help in 2 ways, because you have like 3 standard reactions in this crisis. You have the good ones that really do the right things in terms of nations, I speak now, that take the decisions, are pragmatic, find solutions like Switzerland, like New Zealand, like Norway, and some other countries, and that have really found a good recipe for managing this, where you will have less of a penalty, perhaps also in the midterm, and where the economy will pick up more easily than in other areas after COVID. And therefore, the things we learned now by becoming zombies, but also other things around remote work and around the fact that you may have different ways of collaborating, this will be beneficial. But there is another part of this also, which are the nations that are not very good at handling the coronavirus crisis, like the UK or the United States of America, or Brazil, where in fact there was a sort of a resistance to science, and therefore a loss of time in the beginning and also after that, and where you have, of course, the hardship. Hardship is one of the most powerful drivers of innovation. So you will also have people that will be compelled to go in this direction. There is much more suffering in hardship than there is, of course, in the first three nations I mentioned. But for sure, I think that will also have an accelerating effect. In fact, paradoxically, but with more suffering and more pain to get there. And then you have the middle ground, where I think it will be slower. So the nations a little bit in between, like let's say Germany, France, which have done correctly, but without being in let's say in the top league like the others from a statistical point of view. So innovation and improvement of working conditions, I think, will come mostly from those two extremes, with more suffering from the lower part and with more harmony in the top part, I would say, of that. But you might somebody might differ with me here, especially if you come from those countries. So I'm open for feedback and criticism, of course. I'm not omniscient on this.
Okay, for maybe just a last word in less than a minute. If you had a message to address to both, respectively, the corporation that are the key player to facilitate as well the change, and as well the citizens of the world that are listening to us through this conference, what would be those few words?
Yes. So I would start with the citizens, so the individuals. I would say what is important is that you find a balance. You have now seen how extreme it can be. You're still seeing it probably, how extreme it can be and how far you can go. And there is a lot of suffering also by being disconnected from other people. So the fact that you have a 2D interface like this one is not satisfactory in the long term. We are social animals. We need to exchange. We need to touch each other and hug also. So on that side, find the balance. Try to imagine the post-COVID balance in your life. How much electronics do you want in your life, for instance? How much physical meetings would you want? What kind of life, what kind of proportion of your 24 hours do you want to create? I think that is a very important message. And also the work part of this, if you're an individual, how much work is that and how much play or free time or family or sports or whatever it is that also. So that I would sort of create a plan for yourself, the ideal. And this is a perfect moment because you have a lot of fresh experience and a lot of motivation to do that. And then for the companies, I would say, well, get fit for different expectations from staff. They know now that it's possible to do it differently. Companies that were against remote work, for instance, now have understood that this is, in fact, productive. So what is your employee value proposition as a company and as an organization? What do you offer authentically and flexibly to your staff? Is this what is expected by society? So take the temperature, find out with your current staff, find out from candidates, are you doing the right things? Can you improve it? Now, if you do it now, you will come out of the curve and on the last straight line towards the goal of post-COVID, I would say, in a better way and therefore better shape, and therefore also with less suffering within your populations.
Frode, Avrin, thank you very much for joining us today. Inspiring comments, prospective ones. We look forward to our next conversation, and we thank you again for the time you have granted our audience and ourselves. Thank you very much, Frode. Have a great day.
It was a pleasure and an honor. Thank you very much, and I wish you great continuation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So we are back now with you, dear friends. So we are going now to welcome Samira Khan. So
Hi.
Okay. Samira, lovely seeing you. We are again very grateful because it's very early in United States, so enabled me to introduce Samira now. So Samira can works and is involved in a very pioneering way in social impact plus tech innovation at Salesforce.org. She is as well a great supporter of the SDGs, and she has, her expertise brought on many continents to support this change of paradigm. So, Samira, thank you for joining us. I will let you articulate on the topic and the statements you want to convey. So now, please, the floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. So as Jonathan mentioned, I'm at Salesforce.org. Salesforce.org is the social impact business unit of Salesforce.com. We have 3 main cloud products that are built on Salesforce.com's underlying customer/constituent relationship management platform. One is nonprofit software package by which we serve nonprofits. Second is Education Cloud, geared toward educational institutions in primary education as well as higher education. And the third being a rather new product, Philanthropy Cloud, whose main customer is actually corporations. I am on the impact management team, so we are very much thinking about how do we better articulate, measure, and manage our social impact, but we're also thinking about how do we enable our customers and our partners to do that, and how do we do it in a more collaborative way. Outside of Salesforce.org, at Salesforce, there is a lot of social impact activity. We have a philanthropy team. We have an impact investing fund. We have an Office of Ethical and Humane Use. And today, I'm here to talk to you about something specific. I am here to talk to you about the equality reset. So in a time of a global pandemic where some of the most vulnerable populations are being impacted the most, whether they be women, children, refugees, at a time of increasing racial injustice and unrest, not just in the United States, but globally, it is imperative that we have an equality reset. This reset must take place across workplaces, across geographies, across industries. So you might be asking, what do I mean by this equality reset? And it's really rooted in this notion of a two-pronged challenge around trust. Trust is broken. It's significantly broken. First, trust has been broken between individuals and business models. Corporations clearly have not been able to rectify some of the social injustice and equality issues that have taken place at the workplace. We've seen everything from microaggressions to people feeling held back to outright hate. And the numbers simply do not add up to a good picture. We cannot rely on corporate social responsibility to fill in that gap because clearly it hasn't been worked to date. It hasn't worked to date. The incentives have not been aligned. Last night I was reading in a Harvard Business Review article around this new notion of corporate social justice. There is something there in that notion, but a lot of work will need to be done in the private sector and among corporations individually as well as collaboratively to really get the private sector there where they are vested in committing to social justice. Second, trust has been broken between individuals and institutions. Governments cannot be relied upon to fill in the gaps of corporations, certainly not without bias. Nonprofits in the social sector that are constantly hungry for more funds, more resources, cannot be expected to carry the baton of equality and play the roles that governments should or that corporations should. They simply do not have deep enough pockets, which requires some reallocation of capital, of assets. So this trust being broken requires a transformation during this period of COVID recovery. And that transformation is what I'm calling this equality reset. There's a number of enabling conditions that will allow this equality reset to go successfully or take place. One is around cultural shift or mindset shifts. So we can no longer be so rooted in models of Western civilization, of Europe and the US, without taking a more global centric view about considering how our offices in other geographies are a part of this shared economy and this shared culture, corporate culture globally. Oftentimes, corporate culture is set and viewed at headquarters that lie in Europe or that lie in the United States. But these global offices need to be brought along and on board, not only as offices that are generating income in, say, Asia and India and helping the operations in the US, but as offices that are contributing to a global picture or a global culture for the corporation. So there's that form of equality as well. There also needs to be a change in the actual conditions. Effective immediately, we simply need greater representation of women, minorities, Blacks, a voice and a seat at the table. We cannot wait till society catches up. These trade offs and decisions must be made now. Also, as we think about conditions, there's a two-pronged action agenda that needs to take place. One is around just increased commitments to goals of equality and society being able to hold corporations accountable goals, and not just corporations being transparent with metrics, but actually driving toward those commitments. So that's one. There's this real notion of commitment. And second is investments of resources, investments of actual dollars toward driving this agenda forward. And I think this is where the impact management piece also plays out strongly, because in order to have these goals and commitments and be able to measure against them, you need some frameworks. So that's where the sustainable development goals become really important, because the types of impacts we're trying to measure do affect some of the most vulnerable populations, whether they be women or children or impoverished communities. So that's a great framework to begin to look at some of these problems. We also need a shift in knowledge and skill building. So digital transformation and digital skills pathways create a challenge. There will be populations who will be left behind, but they also pave the way for a great opportunity for acceleration around skill building with these very same populations, where they don't necessarily need 4-year degrees, they don't necessarily need a certain profile, and they don't necessarily need to be in the office in order to succeed. So digital transformation and digital pathways is one avenue to correct some of the things that we're seeing and that might result in this sort of equality reset. So I've seen recently, especially given the pandemic and the racial justice situation, a lot of actions taken by corporations that in fact represent these enabling conditions and these transformations. Google, for example, has done a great job of making a commitment or several commitments, one of which being to have 30% minority representation at leadership levels by 2025. That is something that we can track and watch and measure toward. Google has also directed $100 million in funds to Black-owned businesses or Black-owned capital providers. That is an investment. If we think about increasing partnerships around data and research and academics, MasterCard is investing heavily, Visa, they're thinking about the hardest to reach populations and thinking about how they can invest in the data and the research that enables those voices to be taken into consideration and heard. How do they bank the unbanked? So there's also a number of different capital instruments that have gone along with these investments. Now I want to shift over to the cultural aspect of it. Salesforce, my company, has done a great job of moving in the direction of equality through its culture. Now, culture does not change overnight. It requires multiple avenues, multiple interaction points. So we have individuals interacting with individuals to educate and empower them. We have teams that are dedicated to thinking about racial injustice cross-functionally. We have task groups at different levels, those that are thinking of sort of leadership goals and those that are creating sort of these operational platforms so that we can really execute on it. So Salesforce has very much a culture that is rooted in, okay, how do we ask the right questions to drive forward our equality agenda and improve not just our numbers, but improve the actual culture around equality? This gets to my next point. It is going to be absolutely imperative for us to be able to hear multi-stakeholder voices, for us to be able to understand the lived experiences and the narratives of these harder to reach populations, both domestically in terms of race, in terms of gender, and in terms of harder to reach geographies. So being in the tech sector, I do come across a number of interesting tools. One such tool, for example, is 60 decibels, which is really focused on stakeholder voice and sort of creating a tool to listen better to the populations and the beneficiaries on the ground that are being served. We are going to need such tools, and we're going to need to use tech in a smart way to really get to those voices on the ground. Because I will say that there will be no equality reset without inclusivity. And so I wanted to leave sufficient time for questions. So I'd actually like to pass it back to Jonathan to open this up.
Samira, thank you very much for going in depth in the subject of inclusiveness, inclusion, and as well the needed reset that our societies and people deserve. First question, and if possible in less than a minute, answer will be: what are the driving force that is mobilizing yourself? If you had, to share with our audience, what are the main reason you are standing up on those pillars of development and service for people? What are your main driver yourself?
Yeah, so for me, it is actually, in fact, this notion of how do we serve the hardest to reach and the most vulnerable populations. And it is this notion of societal equality. I mean, I have spent a lot of time, as you mentioned, globally. I, volunteered at Cox's Bazar with refugees there. I went to Nepal after the earthquake. I've spent time in Malaysia and South Asia working with women, including women who've been burnt with acid on their faces, who've been shut out not only by community, but also by their families. So there's a lot this that's rooted in empathy and a narrative that I've created around my purpose. So part of my purpose is, in fact, trying to find ways to serve the most vulnerable populations. And currently, Salesforce has given me an actual sort of a vehicle to do that. There are other ways that I intend to do it down the line that are more hands-on, but right now it's through this lens of technology.
Okay, thank you very much. If you had one message to share with the citizen of the world, the audience that is coming from literally, like all part of the world listening to you and other panelists today, what will be this inspiring message you would like to share with us?
Yeah, so I think that I really encourage individuals to introspect and to try to find the beauty and hope in some of the darkest places. And in doing so, to make a commitment. We all have a number of different challenges we're facing, but I would like people to walk away having made one or two individual commitments to how they will improve society, whether it be equality or some other sustainable development goal. So I would love for you to make that commitment, one or two commitments today.
Samira Khan, thank you very much for enlightening sharing of thoughts and your availability this early morning in the United States. Again, thank you very much, and looking forward building partnership with your organizations and many, like stakeholders, innovators, entrepreneurs that you are supportive on a daily basis. Thank you for joining us, Samira. Have a good day.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. Take care. Bye.
Thank you. So now we are going to go for our next speaker, which is Manu Jindal, who is joining us from Nespresso.
Hi, Jonathan.
Manu, thank you very much for making the time for us. So Nespresso has been actively involved in our last conference we did in Davos, and we are very glad to have you, to welcome you. You are a strong executive involved in the field of sustainability for this, I would say, top-notch, like group. So Manu, we would like to be very pleased and very happy to explore and see how the long-term partnership and relationship, the foundations for driving sustainability, that will be the topics and the theme you will be articulating to our audience. So please, Manu Jindal, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. First of all, I wish all your participants, I hope they and their family are safe in these testing times. For me, when I was thinking about being a sustainability professional, over the past few months and last couple of years working, what is some of the insights and something which I can share today. And the word which kept coming back was partnerships and relationships. Why? Before substantiating that, let me just share a bit in brief uh, what I have been doing at Nespresso, and where how we at Nespresso are looking at sustainability as a clear business imperative, not just something to do. Um, for us, as Nespresso, we sell coffee, and there's a commitment to consumers on a certain recipe, certain profile, and if that consistency needs to be served, we need to buy the coffee from the coffee farmers, and that allows us to build long-term partnerships. Why? Because we want to buy from specific countries, specific origins, even in those regions specific farmers, so that we can have the same profile of the coffee and able to share it with our consumers globally. This consistency allows us to have a long term view and build long term partnerships. And I think that's, for me, is a fundamental thing that when you start in one origin, someone like me who's a professional working in for example, India, Indonesia, you know I can build my projects from a long term view, build these partnerships with the local communities, with the local farmers, and build projects. It's not you just go there, do a small project, and that's it. No, that will not solve the substantial challenges and the value creation opportunities which are there for these communities. It requires a long term approach. Sustainability, as we all know, is a journey, and for me that allows you to build those partnerships with local stakeholders, and then the relationship, so that you belong there. You are not coming across from outside just to tell people what to do. No, you work with the local partners, with the local communities. You develop projects together, you develop ownership, you create empowerment. And I think that's, for me, is the real work which needs to be done to create a long-term change. And in COVID times, if I reflect even personally or professionally, I think these values have been reinforced for me. You know, today when we see in the countries where we work, some of the countries were going through harvest, where it's a crucial time for farmers. And as a company who has been with these farmers, these communities for many years, and that the program on sustainability we have, it allows us to build on that and keep the network alive. Keep working with the farmers, stand there in these times with them. We understand the challenge of COVID is huge, but end of the day, each individual, each organization, each company has a role to play. And I think that's something we all realize. And I think just being there with the people, doing anything which we can to support them, I think that's what relationship is. That's what creates resilience. It's not that uh, you have a short-term relationship, and then when these things happen, there is you don't see the value of what you did. And that's why if you have a long term view, you double down in these times. Right now, we, for example, in Brazil, we are able to create a lot of manuals on how we can, farmers and the workers can follow the safety things. We were able to do radio spots. In India, Indonesia, we were able to support on PPEs, able to share masks, sanitizers. And I'm not saying these are super innovative things, but this shows that if you have those partnerships, if you know where you are working, if you have the right channels in place, you understand the local needs of people, and then you can deliver on it. And you can stand with the people, and they realize that in good times or in bad times, the company is there, and we are not being opportunistic. And I think that for me is the power of long-term sustainability programs. um, Certain values which come across for me, which again get reinforced and revalidated in COVID time, is working on resilience. How we make supply chains, in sustainable, in agriculture networks, more resilient. And for that, again, it's about working holistically. Within Nespresso, we are working on social, environmental, quality, productivity. You need a holistic approach to ensure resilience. In Colombia, we were able to work on pension plans and crop insurance with government, to a landscape approach in Brazil, to very specific mass approach in Africa to serve thousands of smallholder farmers. Each country gives you a different context, and if you are focus on the depth of your impact, because you are working with same group of people year on year, it allows you that depth. It's not just you go there, you do a small thing, and that drives relationship. When I went to Indonesia in West Java first year, when I told that we'll be here, we are buying coffee, we'll keep working with you, we'll do things together, people don't trust you. As your past speaker was saying, you need to be there year on year, do the things, and that's how you create the relationship. It's not easy. It's not you just make some strategies. No, how you execute those strategies, the value of humility, the value of empathy, the value of dissolving yourself in local ecosystem, the value of listening to local stakeholders. I think these are the real values which stand out for me, if you are in the game for long term, and not short term. And I think this is something in COVID we are learning again and again. For resilience of supply chain, you need to develop, work with stakeholders closely. You cannot be just stay far from your supply chains. You need to encourage empowerment. You need to listen to your stakeholders and work with them. And for me, that creates value. um, and I think going forward, you know my conviction, and what I'm sure most companies who are ready to look at sustainability very, very as a business imperative. I think, as one theme of your conversation, which is inclusivity, I think we will be more and more inclusive. I think the topics of human rights, topic of income, topic of carbon, all these things are, there's a balance on social environmental resilience on one level, and economic viability, economic empowerment on other level. And I think we see, in COVID times, uh, you know uh, in all humility, we are all recognizing the value of this balance. We need to take care of environment, we need to take care of social ecosystems, while in parallel we need to make sure that economically the most vulnerable of the societies we are doing, and we are supporting them, and we are there with them for long. So I'll stop there, and I hope I'm able to share what I could. And again, it goes back to, strategy is fine, operations is fine, but values, I think, I have come out very strongly in these COVID time, that as us, as professionals, as individuals, as corporations, the values is will be looked upon by your consumers, by public at large, by society at large, and companies needs to walk the talk on these values. And I think that for me is a key learning and key insight.
Dear Manus, thank you very much for sharing your grassroots experience of within a corporation that has impact an interaction with thousands of citizens, how things are happening. Maybe just in a less than a minute answer, what would be your statement for the citizen of the world that are listening to us? What would be the encouraging thoughts you would like to share with them, being, someone that stands for sustainability within the private sector at this moment?
I think for me it's simple. I think it's just realization that we all have to play a role. We are all, whoever has a privilege to create value for beyond yourself. I think whatever small or big it is, we should all introspect and see in our roles wherever we are in corporations or at personal level what we can do. We need to empathize with the global community. We know people are in many areas a very vulnerable position, and we need to find empathy and find solutions. And I think for that we need to go back to the core values of caring, of respect, of humility, and I think and compassion. And I think these values, sometimes are in the everyday stress and heaviness of the work. Sometimes people forget. I think in COVID times we realize end of the day people will remember people, not slides, not PowerPoints, not Excel. And I think as people we need to stand out with these values to connect with larger audiences and ensure that we are there and we mean, we really belong. And I think that's my message. Let's all introspect and see how we stand on the values which we know are super important today, to create those connections with fellow human beings, fellow friends, fellow colleagues.
Manu Jindal, thank you very much for this inspiring sharing of thoughts and the time you dedicated to our international audience. Thank you very much again, and
Thank you,
looking forward
Jonathan.
to meeting you in person when we will be visiting your team in Switzerland. So all the
Thank you
best,
so much.
Manu Jindal, and we speak soon. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Bye bye.
We are now going to welcome our last speaker for this plenary session with Samuel Said. Samuel Said. Okay. Dear Samir, thank you very much for making the time with us today. Samir is the executive chairman of the Mayfair Investment Club. Samir is involved in many ways. He is not only an investor, but he is as well a philanthropist, a pioneering in thinking the world of tomorrow. And I'm very pleased to have him joining from London today. Samir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and what a great pleasure to be here with you and your audience. And I don't think I ever told you, but a few years ago, you actually inspired me to create Mayfair Investment Club, which at the time wasn't really at the forefront of my mind, but it became about a year ago. And my journey has been, and the topic today, the importance of impact investment culture and education of the privileged kids. I see myself as one of these kids many years ago, born into privilege, and also kind of lived and was schooled in the environment of a very powerful grandfather, in particular with a triple degree, 7 languages, traveled the world, very, very influential in the region, and coming from the family that has somewhat ruled that region for many, many generations. I then found myself at the age of 18 in London, where my life changed. The sort of terrible war in the former Yugoslavia led to actually 1,425 days of the siege of Sarajevo. And I think that at that point, I really learned about self-isolation, although from a distance, and what quarantine really meant, because my nation had to go through 4 years of a very, very challenging, difficult times. And I recently sort of looked at the COVID-19 when it emerged, and I kind of, it took me back 30 years to remember those times whereby, we were given instructions how to be able to survive, whether from distance or there. So when I came up with the Mayfair Investment Club as the concept to bring the second and third generation of, what I call the privileged kids that are studying at some of the best universities in London, whether it's a CUS, Imperial, UCL, Regents, London Business School. I thought, these young individuals are sort of surrounded by stigma. One thinks that being privileged is a big advantage, and to a point it is. By the same time, you are also stigmatized because of who you come from, what your surname is, which schools you've gone to, and what your expectations are when you finish all this education. And many of them, tend to have a very, very few choices in the sense of whether they're going to go and work for big investment banks or whether they're going to actually go and work for the family business. So we've come up with a club that is really there to safeguard their interest in becoming investors rather than entrepreneurs. But the key thing isn't actually about the money that they're going to earn through the investment cycle, the education they're going to get, the people they're going to meet, but it's the whole ambience that I want to create, understanding that in actual fact, inside the club, there'll be the members, there'll be tomorrow's leaders, there'll be the people that'll be running countries, they'll be running big financial institutions, which are incredibly important for the economy and sustainability, is to actually introduce the concept of philanthropy and launch the foundation alongside the lines of United Nations 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Because when I was growing up, although I was lucky to have been born into sort of a charitable environment, I also felt London is such a big city with lots and lots of possibilities, by the same time, lots of pathways that aren't always very much on the level of understanding what role we want to play. So my own vision and passion, that's part of the things that I want to do, the difference that I want to make in other people's lives, the fact that I want to eventually go back to the region of former Yugoslavia to rebrand not just Bosnia, where I come from, but the entire region, to show the world that it's incredibly sort of powerful, talented nations that live there, is something that I really also want to project inside the Mayfair Investment Club and its members, because I believe if you have strong mentors, I believe if you have people that have walked the walk and talked the talk, that genuinely care about where you're going next, that you actually shape your own mindset. And I think all the previous speakers talked about the importance of one's mindset. They talked about this X-shaped individuals. The fact that I remember my conversations with Professor Grayling in London, the importance of adaptability, and adaptability has never been more prevalent than it is today in today's sort of global pandemic and crisis. I just felt, that's something that I want to do long term. I want to do it in London, but I want to also do it globally. I want to sort of pass on certain elements of mistakes that I made, and the mistakes that some of the board members of the Mayfair Investment Club have also made. And I also really want to positively impact that change. And I think where, Jonathan, you and I have really understood each other with your own vision for Horyou and SIGEF, and I just felt, behind the scenes, you were also a big inspiration of my latest venture. Not that you actually knew that much about it, but I just thought I'd tell you that now.
Well, dear Samir, thank you again for your supportive words. And this is, the principle of resonance. And so inspiration is not unilateral. It goes, it circulates, it flows, and that's the aim of this event today at this very historical moment. So Samir, maybe in less than a minute answer, what is the driving force that is, standing for you to want to support in an impactful way the generations to come? What is the main driver of your commitment and your passion?
Well, I think I genuinely believe that we are never too big or too small to impact a change. I think whether you're born into a privilege or less privilege, we are here with the purpose. And one of the most important but also most difficult things for many, many people around the world is to really discover and find that purpose. I have found the purpose off the back of my own journey. It wasn't a straightforward journey. It wasn't an easy journey, But I believe it was a journey that was designed to be like that because it strengthened my character. In the times of crisis, which many of us have experienced, we can really rediscover ourselves, and we can use the hardship that we've all experienced to really redefine ourselves, to regroup, and to find a purpose that will serve the greater good, that will go alongside the lines of the sustainability and the sustainable development goals, which is not just the buzzwords that many discuss and use, but something that will really positively impact the world that we live in today and to create newer and brighter future for all of us.
Samir, thank you very much. And maybe a last word, if you had a word, a thought to address to the citizen of the world, and as well to the next generation of people that will support the citizen of the world. What would be those words?
I think, again, every citizen of the world is here to do and achieve something, however little, however big it is within their local community. I think it all comes back to the family and community values that we tend to forget in fast-paced cities like London, but we don't tend to forget in the smaller communities. And I think the next generation really ought to understand that in order to lead by example, we have to continue developing personally, professionally, and educating ourselves about the importance of helping thy neighbor.
Samir Serik, thank you very much for the joining forces with us today and all the inspiring statements you have shared with our audience. Looking forward to our next exchange and building this change all together for an inclusive and more harmonious future. Thank you very much, Samir Serik.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.